Hello, I'll be giving a demo of StageCraft VR. StageCraft VR is a simulation where you can practice giving presentations. You can set some presentation settings for the presentation you will give. You can select your microphone input device from this menu and give it a mic test to ensure that it's working. Test to make sure my thing and you can play that back to make sure my thing. You can also set distraction levels, the amount of audience members, and the amount of questions you will receive in the presentation. The higher the distraction level, the more audience noises and distractions that will appear during the presentation. The amount of audience members will fill up the amount of people in the room, so it can go from 100% to 1%. You can set the amount of questions you receive from the audience. These questions will be pulled from the keywords that you provide. I will provide a few keywords based on the presentation I'll be giving on a game project called Project ZipZap. I've provided the 5 keywords of game development, isometric, hack and slash, fast-paced, and movement for my presentation. The audience will use these keywords to generate 5 questions related to this. You can finally set the room that you'll be giving the presentation in, which displays how many seats are in that room. When I click Start Presentation, after hitting Start Presentation, you enter the presentation room. In this presentation room, there's 2 PowerPoint slides that are displayed to the audience. The layouts can be different for each presentation room. You will see on your screen controls to navigate the presentation. The presentation is now being recorded for data. So to explain the ultimate abilities on Project ZipZap to encourage players to feel a sense of strength and ability. The presentation will listen for me saying filler words such as or ah or to essentially keep track of data related to how you're presenting. It's also keeping track of where I'm looking at the audience or where I'm just looking in general. So I have to explain that the arts and assets are going to be very much low poly because that's the aim that we're going for in the game. You will hear distraction noises from the audience, whether it's them chatting or notification noises from their phones, coughing and sneezing. It's all dependent on how far on the distraction slider you've put the audience. So if I were just to quickly go through the presentation of saying that the world we're going for is going to be sort of cyberpunky and very decayed. Our character would look like a samurai. As you can hear, there's different distractions, so that was a cough. So now that we've hit the end of the presentation, the audience puts their hands up to start asking questions, and this is based on the keywords I submitted and also the number of questions I put into the slider. If I were to select one of the audience members,
how can game developer balance difficulty and accessibility in a fast-paced isometric hack-and-slash game?
So the audience member will read out the question that they asked, and as you can see, the question asked relates to the presentation based on the keywords that I provided them. So I would answer the question saying that they could balance the difficulty and accessibility in fast-paced games, that are hack and slash by having different difficulty levels, which would help newer players be able to select an easier difficulty for themselves. As you can hear, the voices are different depending on the person asking the question.
How is isometric perspective utilized in game development to enhance player experience?
What are some strategies for creating fast, paced, movement mechanics in an isometric hack and slash game?
What are some common challenges faced when developing a fast-paced hack and slash game with isometric movement?
So once I've answered that final question that I'd be giving the audience member, we now get some data related to the presentation. So the first important piece of information is the head tracking heat map, which displays where you most commonly looked in the room. So as you can see, blue means I looked briefly during the presentation, and red is places that I looked at more than of the presentation's length. So as you can see, since I was looking at my screen a whole lot, the heat map was aimed primarily towards my monitor, and as you can see, sometimes I was looking around at the different audience members. Next important part is the speech report, which shows me how many filler words I used, how long my pauses were typically when talking, different filler sounds I used, and the total amount of words my presentation was. Finally, you have your final score, which keeps track of all of that data and then maps it to an overall score of how well your presentation went. You will see a return to main menu button upon finishing the presentation, which will let you reset some new settings and also set a new room for your next presentation. Finally, to add new presentations, you open up the Quest 2 in your computer, internal storage, Android, data, you find the The Foundry StageCraft VR project, you open up files, and inside you'll see a presentation folder, and you import your presentation PNG or JPEG files in the appropriate order. So for example, it has to be written as capital S, slide, and then the number. So slide 1, slide 2, etc.